Okay, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are. So, today, here in the afternoon over the weekend, we are here to discuss some topical issues in our continent. We have here with us our brother, Pan Africanist Kwame Gonza. Welcome, Kwame.
Oh, thank you very much, Mahlet. Thank you for having me today, and greetings to all the people who are watching Connect Africa. It's very, very important that we continue to inform ourselves about what is happening to our continent. Like they say, we are Africans, and Africa is our business.
Mhm.
So, thank you very much for having me today.
Indeed, it's a pleasure. We always have a pleasure to have you here, and of course, benefit from your analysis, from your Pan African perspectives, the way you look at things, what's happening in the continent. Yeah, so the US Africa Summit, the second US Africa Summit is approaching, which is going to be held in the mid of this month from 13th to 15th. So it's this one is the second one since the Obama administration that was in 2014. A lot has happened in the past 8 years. All those countries who have business with Africa, of course, Africa is the source of everything. So nobody wants to leave alone this country or this continent. Um, yeah, so we had China, Russia, India, Turkey, I think also Japan, all these countries have had their Japan, Africa, Turkey, Africa, all those kinds of summits. So is the US the summit that US now has called, or rather, shall we say, summoned our leaders to have this summit in Washington, is just another, race for the US to catch up what it has missed from the continent from various angle. Yeah, what is it about? Of course, there are certain agendas on the table, but yeah, please go ahead and tell us what's your take on this.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, thank you very much, Malet. Is very important, like we said, to continuously look at our continent, and it's very good that we're having these conversations, because, to be honest, these conversations are not being had anywhere on the continent. We have an African media which is focusing on very different things. People are running in different directions. But when there is actually geopolitical events that are happening today that are so much important, that we should not, our media and civil society as Africans should not afford and cannot afford not to pay attention to, cannot afford to ignore. But you see that from time to time, our media doesn't pay attention to it, and of course, for reasons which are understandable, that our media in certain cases is not controlled by us, apart from a few countries, like maybe you can talk of Ethiopia, and a few other countries like maybe Zimbabwe or something. But majority of the media is being controlled from outside, and so they don't pay attention to these things. If they pay attention and they know what is going on, then they don't want Africans to know what is going on. That there is things that they are, that are important, that Africans should pay attention to, because these events are consequential. The future of the continent, the future of the Africans as a people, depend on it. Imagine that if the Africans knew what was happening in Berlin in 1884, Africans would have prepared themselves, and we would have prepared ourselves during that time, because we would have known that Europeans are coming to colonize us. So it is very important that events like these, when they are happening, you are talking about US Africa Summit. We have had summits, numerous of them, as you have elaborated on them, China Africa Summit. Turkey Africa Summit. Turkey also comes and puts up, summits to summon Africa. India, okay, UK Africa Summit, Europe Africa Summit. So everyone wants to have summit. I think there's been also some Arab Africa Summit, something like that. So everyone is putting up a summit. And these people is not because they love us. It's not because they like us so much or they want to contribute to our development. It is because they want to take care of their own people, their interests. And with that, I'll close in on the United States on this U.S. Africa Summit. The previous U.S. Africa Summit, I think they have not produced much when you are talking about the tangible benefits, apart from what what Obama did. He came up with the AGOA, but what followed the AGOA or Africa, what is the full the AGOA is it Africa growth? I think Africa growth and what? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, African.
Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was brought by Obama, which is a bill that was passed by Obama. But what happened after that Africa Growth and Opportunity Act? What followed was Obama coming to destroy Libya, an economy which was very advanced on the African continent, one of the most developed. And they even stole, the United States went as far as to steal the gold that was present in the central bank in Libya. So you can see that these summits have not produced any tangible benefits for the Africans, apart from narrative that continues to be paraded around, sort of like aid is important to Africa. Now, this summit is coming when there is a lot of things that are going on in the world. When the United States is confronting China, we need to pay close attention to that. This summit is coming when the United States is interfering all over the African continent and disturbing places like Ethiopia. You have seen how it tried to interfere in the in the negotiations and the agreements that that have been coined, that have been achieved by the African Union, to try to stop the rebels in the northern part of the country in Tigray. You have seen the United States putting military bases all over. So these are the events that are surrounding this, summit on the African continent on itself. And also this summit is coming amidst people starting to wake up, especially in West Africa, where France is being rejected. Okay. People in Mali, Burkina Faso, you have seen in Guinea, people are rejecting this colonialism. But on top of that, also, when we look at externally what is happening within the imperialistic camp itself, I'm talking about the United States, Britain, and Europe, and all the other countries in the West. It is coming when they are in confrontation with Russia, at a period when they are in confrontation with Russia, because they have been looking at Russia as an obstacle, actually, since the 1940s, since the advent of the 19th and the 20th century. Russia has been looked at as a rogue, sort of a rogue brother, because Russians are also Europeans, but they are sort of like a rebellious brother who rebelled against the European doctrine of colonization. And so instead, the Russians came and started aiding the people who were fighting against, this European colonialism. And so ever since the 19th and the 20th century, the Russians have never been, forgiven. So that is why you see they are always, on Russia's back and hunting Russia down and trying to demonize Russia, because Russia has always been on the side of of the colonized, the oppressed people. And just to tell you also, during the Berlin Conference in 1884, Russia actually was there at the Berlin Conference, but did not get any, Russia did not get any colonies. So Russia went on, to oppose the doctrine, the strategy, the policy of colonization of a people. And so you can see that Russia was at confrontation in Vietnam when there was a war in Vietnam. Russia was on the side of northern Vietnam. You can see in Korea also, Russia was on the side of North Korea. You can see in China when during the Chinese Revolution, Russia was if the Soviet Union did not help China during the Chinese Revolution, China would not, Mao Zedong, the Chinese Communist Party would not have won, that was. So Russia is being, confronted. And when you come to Africa also itself, Russia was here very much supporting all the revolutionary, parties and revolutionary forces on the African continent, in Angola, in Zimbabwe. We have recently even seen pictures where Vladimir Putin was in Tanzania trying to train, the Zimbabwe forces, the ZANU-PF. So Russia was present in countries like Ghana. So even helping to transfer technology during that time, it was called the Soviet Union, of course, and giving a lot of loans which were favorable. Even when you read Nkrumah's book, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism, Nkrumah mentions the aid terms which were given to African countries and poor countries and global South countries by the Soviet Union. The terms of aid, they were very favorable always, and even the interest rate that was given on those loans, was always favorable. Now, I've delayed on Russia because it is very important to understand that these historical events, they matter to what is happening today. It is important for us as Africans to understand the value of where we are coming from, because it is where we are coming from that is shaping where we are, that has shaped where we are today. It is yesterday's events that shaped where we are today. And what we do today is what is going to be history yesterday. Okay, it is what is going to be history tomorrow, and then the future is going to be shaped by what we are doing, today. So it is important for us to look back and understand. So Russia, that has been its footprint. So when they are demonizing Russia or China, it's important for us to go back in history. History will tell us the nature of Africa's relationship with Russia or China, and then we will be in a much better position for us to decide who should be our partners going forward, development partners. When we are talking about development partners as the African continent, who should we look up? Who should we look at or up to first, to consider as development partners? Russia has been in Mali. Okay, you remember that when the government came in Mali and they were able to overthrow that, to overthrow a French-backed president, that they invited the Wagner Group from Russia. So all these events, they have contributed to the aggression that is being, and the pressure that is being applied onto Russia, because Russia came to, to continue, to help Africa, because France wanted to overthrow the government. The government that is being, led by, President Goita, in Mali, which government has proved to be, Pan-African in its nature. It has proved to be pro-people in its nature. So when Russia came to be able to protect these people, then the United States came up with a bill, which is called the HR 7311. HR 7311, which is called a bill for countering malign Russian activities in Africa. So this bill was to be passed, in the House of Congress in the United States. So the bill they claim is to counter Russia in Africa, as if Africa doesn't know what to do. And people like the Minister of Foreign Relations in South Africa, Madame Naleda Pandor, she stood up against even this bill, even President Cyril Ramaphosa, and said if this bill passes in Congress in the United States, it will be very unfortunate. It will be disrespectful to Africans, and we don't like it that somebody tells us what to do. So all these are colonial tactics. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to lay a background so that we can understand what this summit is all about. What is the purpose of this summit? Now, amidst all this that is going on around the world, Russia, China, the United States has also come out of, it has just pulled out of Afghanistan. It pulled out of, of Afghanistan. I think it was last year or around the beginning of this year or last year. So it was a great a victory for the Afghan people, even though the United States and the East European allies, its colonial allies, went ahead to seize money from the Afghani people, which is almost around 7 billion people, which is money that is needed. And this is theft, this is stealing. But because they're superpowers, then there's no one to condemn them. And the other leaders of the world are sort of maybe fearful. But I think China and Russia have condemned these acts, and they have called for the release of these funds. But the Afghani people were able to come out victorious. They were able to resist the United States for more than 20 years. And the Taliban's, even though they were pushed out of power, they came back to power after 20 years. And the United States left that place while running from the place, and their planes and stuff. They were just rushing out of the place. And Afghanistan definitely has challenges. It is going to face a lot of challenges, but I think they are very strong people who have withstood. If they have withstood the pressure for the last 20 years, I think they will be able to hold it together with cooperation with other nations. So these are the problems which the United States is facing. But also, the whole of the United States and the Western world is facing tremendous challenges economically. When we go back to 2020, at the advent of the COVID-19, we saw that these economies started shrinking. Actually, the economies in the Western world had started shrinking as far as 2018, because you remember there was an economic depression in 2008, a very, very big economic depression in the Western world. That economic depression, which almost destroyed, the whole world economy, whereby more than 35 million jobs were destroyed by this economic depression. So another economic depression happened in 2018, because these economic depressions, they normally happen in a period of 10 years. So this 2020, it was just a sign. It was an exacerbation of that, economic depression that happened in 2018 again. And so the economies in the Western world have been reeling. And so that is why you see they started the war on China. They started the economic war on China, because their economies are depressed. You go to states like Detroit, which was an industrial hub, has become, deindustrialized. It has become like Iraq. The place is dirty. It is like a ghosty town. You go to streets like in California and Los Angeles, people are sleeping on the streets. You see, homelessness is skyrocketing. So they are facing a lot of problems. And when you go to Europe itself also, you see the yellow jackets on the streets in France, you see. So you go to Britain, the economy is depressed. Italy, these were the first people to get problems. Italy, Spain, Greece, in very, very bad shape. So what is happening in the Western world is that there has been a lot of mismanagement, misuse of resources, because they thought that they will be here forever, and they can always depend on other people and colonize other people and exploit other people to keep themselves going. And so they have gone on to mismanage, have bloated, military budgets, because these bloated military budgets should be used to suffocate other people, intimidate, and suffocate other people, and take the resources by force, as we have seen in Iraq. We have seen in the whole of Middle East, and Iran has resisted them. We've seen in Afghanistan, and so what they see now, as you have seen that the African Command, they have been attempting, they are attempting to establish, an office in Zambia, is that they want to secure Africa's resources for themselves. As you have seen, countries like Zambia, it has huge deposits of copper on the border, actually on its border, with the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's a lot of copper around there. So that is the purpose of establishing this. And then there's a lot of lithium, in Zimbabwe, which is also, in proximity is bordering Zambia. So they are trying to secure these resources for their industry. As you are seeing that transport now is evolving. This transport system is evolving, that electric cars are taking over. So electric cars, they are running on motors, electric motors, and they need copper, to make these motors. So it is industrial purposes that you see that they are establishing all this machinery. Now, the summoning of the African leaders, to this US Africa summit is to accelerate that process, because they are shifting their military, activities now from the Middle East onto the African continent in order to push out Russia. On the other side, I showed you that they have a bill in Congress. They are trying to demonize Russia. And then on the other side, they are demonizing China with massive propaganda. Now, on this side, the Africa Summit, they are trying to coerce the African leaders and sometimes to intimidate them, sometimes outright corrupt them and buy them out, so that they can continue to release, or they can even accelerate the process of releasing Africa's resources to go and rebuild, actually, not only to build, because Africans have already contributed immensely, hugely contributed to the construction of European civilization, whether Europe and the United States. We contributed, in the 19th, starting actually from the 17th century, when they appeared on the African continent. They took our bodies, they took our, mineral resources in the 19th century, 20th century. They have continued to do the same. So we built, now they destroyed, and they are misused these resources. And the tactics now which they want to employ is to continue to use the same means of exploitation and rebuild what they have destroyed. Because like I've shown you, in Europe, the economies are very depressed. They have been shrinking. In the United States, when you go and look at the economic data of this year, the United States in the first quarter, the economy shrank by, I think, by around 4.6. In the second quarter, it continued to shrink by, I think, around 1.4, 1.3, somewhere there. And even in the third quarter, the economy continued to shrink. So they are shrinking. Even when you go to Britain, the situation is the same. When you go to France, during even the COVID period, the economy of France was shrinking by almost 9%, 6%. So these are the reasons for the calling of the US Africa Summit. And we see disagreements also between the United States and France, and now Germany in Europe, because everyone now, to a certain level, they try to take care of their own business. Okay, so the United States, even to a certain level, it bullies, Europe, to a certain level. That's why you have seen things like encouraging them to boycott the gas from Russia. And even some people have said that the United States has been responsible for blowing up the Nord Stream 2 and the Nord Stream 1, the pipelines which are supposed to bring gas to Europe from Russia. So it encourages them, and then they will continue to suffer, like that. So so we have that scenario there, but the whole strategy is that they want to continue to employ what Dick Cheney, who was the vice president during George Bush's time, called the strategy of maximum extraction, that they want to continue to extract maximally the resources from Africa and prevent Russia from being there to help Africa to defend itself, or China to be here to give better terms, not the best terms, but China has been able to give us, better terms than what the West has been giving us, far better times, or 1,000 times much more better terms than what the West has given us. So they don't want this. They want us to be completely vulnerable people, completely helpless people, so that they can use this strategy, which I said that Dick Cheney, coined, the strategy of maximum extraction. They will continue to extract the resources out of the African continent. So this is what this summit is about. This summit is not about making things better for Africa. It's not about improving the relations, because like Nkrumah said in one of his writings, Nkrumah said that it is far easier for a proverbial camel to pass through a needle's eye than an erstwhile colonial, administration to give any constructive political advice to a territory which was recently a colony. So let me repeat that. Nkrumah
Yeah.
said that it is far easier for a proverbial camel. Actually, he was paraphrasing the Bible, which says it is far easier for a camel to go through a needle's eye than a rich man to go to heaven. So what
Oh.
Nkrumah was saying, yeah. So what Nkrumah was saying, that it is far easier for a camel, a proverbial camel, to go through a needle's eye than a colonial, nation to give advice to a once colony, a colonial territory. You see, so what he's saying, that the imperialists, they cannot give, any wise political counsel to the territories which they want to exploit, because their purpose for being here is not human rights, is not to give correct political counsel or to develop the colonial territories. Their purpose is to make their lives better, to exploit. And what is ironic is that they have exploited not only the once colonial territories, but they went home also and exploited their people. And this is the danger of capitalism, that they went home and exploited their people. And then when their people are complaining that you are over exploiting us, and you are applying, these policies which are not improving the Western world, even itself, then they want to divert the attention. They want to divert the attention that they are around the world fighting some holy cause of human rights and freedom and liberty. They are spreading some sort of holy, mission. They are on some sort of holy mission. So, but all this is to diverge, to put a divergency and diverge the attention of their people, so that the people will not demand, what belongs to them. We have seen skyrocketing income inequality. A few people, they have, 10%, they own 90% of the wealth, even in the Western world, with the focus on the United States, of course. 10% of the people in the United States, they own 90% of the wealth, and 90% of the people, they own the remaining 10%. So this income inequality, causes a lot of conflict and backlash, and I think past people like Ray Dalio, who's a billionaire investor, has written about this in one of his books. The book is called Understanding Principles for Dealing with, Principles for Understanding How to Deal with the Changing World Order. And one of the problems he mentions that is facing the Western world is the income inequality, increasing income inequality. There is a very huge income inequality that is causing a lot of problems. And that is what led to the election of people like Trump. So these problems, when they, and I mentioned in California and Los Angeles on the streets, the increasing homelessness. If you go to the internet, you can go even on YouTube and check it out for yourself, and check, you pin it in, you type it in, and you see, just type in homelessness in California. You will see people sleeping on streets, in tents, plenty people, a lot of people on streets, queues and queues on people all over, full streets. So these problems, they don't want to confront them at home and take the wealth and redistribute it, so that people have, people feel that they are cared for, the wealth to be equitable. So they divert the people's attention, and which problem actually is temporary. What they're doing is a temporary, enterprise. What they are engaging in is a temporary, enterprise of pleasing the 10% at the expense of 90, of the 90%, and to divert the attention of the 90%. And the other thing is that this temporary, measure which they are employing, it will not be acceptable even on the African continent, because our population and understanding, has also grown as a people. This is the information age. This is what I mean, that we know what is going on in the world. We know the intentions of these people. But I think to some extent, they are naive. They think that we are going to stay in the 18th century or the 17th century forever, that we would not know what is going on in the world, which is out of this world. That right now we know what is going on in the world, and definitely we are bound to resist. And that is what you have seen in Mali. That is what you have seen, that is what you have seen in Burkina Faso. That is what you have seen in Guinea. That is what, that's the discontent that you are seeing that is going on all over the continent, even in Ghana. We have seen this discontent start building up. So this, I think that is the trend which the African leaders have to be attentive to. They have to pay attention to this trend. They have to pay, the African leaders, as they're going to this summit, I think that they have to pay attention to the condition, to the temperature, or on the continent. What are the people saying on the continent? The one of the things which I was talking about is that as Africans, I think that when we are going to this summit, the leaders should go with certain demands. It is incumbent upon people like the chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Musa Faki, and the chairperson of the African Union, who is President Macky Sall, to come together before this summit and write down the position of the African continent, mobilize actually the African leaders on the continent, and write down that this is a position. However much African leaders are isolated when they go to Washington. Actually, I thought that this summit was going to be in Morocco, because there was talk of it being in Morocco at first. But when they go to Washington to this summit, they will isolate them to try to corner them. But they should stick to a position, an African position, and we should have demands. We should agree that Africa has reached a time for solving its own problems. And this is evidenced by what happened, in South Africa recently, whereby the African Union led peace negotiations, and the peace was able to come back to Ethiopia. Regardless of the challenges, which we face now, we know that, they are still trying to sabotage this, but it is the African Union which did this. And even in the Congo, the African Union has taken, that same, strategy, to approach the problem that we have in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that you see that Uhuru Kenyatta is there, you see that the East African community is there. It has started taking the responsibility. So I think that the African leaders need to stand on their feet and say, this is the direction where we want to take our continent. And we want to take care of our security all over the continent, not only in the East African region and the Horn of Africa, where leaders have stood up and said we are going to be responsible for our region. We don't want interference. Eritrea, Somalia, places like Uganda, the whole East Africa region has stood up and said we can take care of our business. We don't need you guys to start coming here and start bombing and destroy. We have seen what you have done in Afghanistan. We have seen what you have done in Iraq. We've seen what you did in Somalia in 1993, 1994. We saw what you did in Libya recently in 2011. We don't want that chaos you can't continue that chaos and bring it over here in East Africa and the Horn of Africa region. So I think that position needs to be, maintained and held by all African heads of state. And I think that it is the responsibility of the responsibility of the chairperson of the African Union Commission and the chairperson of the African Union, who is Musa Faki and under President Macky Sall of Senegal, that they have to come together to mobilize the continent and put them on the same page, put them on the same paper, that this is where we want the continent to to go, because this is, honestly, this is the feeling of most of the African people on the continent.
Indeed, I agree with you, Brother Kwame. Thank you very much, really, to unfold all those background, where this summit is coming in the midst of all these things are happening. You have laid out the geopolitics battle on the continent. We have seen, the best example, and the recent example is Ethiopia, and then what's happening in West Africa, the defeat that they are facing, the resistance of, some of the Western African countries, which, by the way, led a couple of countries not couple, I think 3 countries from West Africa not to be invited in this summit. And I really, really love the background that you gave about Russia, how it has been bullied so far by the Western, led by the US, how it has been cornered, and how, the history of Russia in terms of standing with those invaded by the West. It's really, which can be actually a topic for another day. I really, really love, to delve into that. I'm sure our audience will benefit from that. And then the economic depression, which most of us do not pay attention that it's happening. There's actually a pattern that every decade it's happening, and when it's happening, something, has to happen to cover that in the world, again led by the Western world. And then, the economic depression in their own countries over the exploitation, and then how they divert that. It's really, really important, the historical aspect, because, as you said, without yesterday, there is no present, and then there is no future. So it's really important to lay out those historical aspects, and then, to explain what's happening also presently. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed. I am sure that our audiences have also, we learn from this, because the main part, the first and foremost, the main aim or the objective of such platform like this Connect Africa and others is to create awareness. We know that somewhere, whether it's 2 people, 3 people, it will awaken. It will, knowledge is power, information is power. The way I talk, it might seem that we are closing, but we are far from that. Now let's go to still on the US Africa Summit. We have seen, they said 49 countries have been invited out of 55 member states, and 4 of them are because they are banned by the African Union because of the coup that's happening. Whether the coup is right or not, that's something debatable. It's for the African people to say, but the African Union has banned those countries, namely Guinea, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Sudan. And the other 2 are Eritrea and Western Sahara. Also, they are regular members like the rest of the 49 member states in the African Union, but they have not been invited by the US because they haven't, from as per my readings, they haven't exchanged diplomatic mission with the US. Now, my question is there anything that actually these member states would lose by not participating or not taking part in this summit? And what would have been actually the African Union stand, at least for those 2 countries, which are regular members of the Union, which are not banned, Eritrea and Western Sahara? Is there anything that they would lose by not taking part? And then what would have been the AU stance?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mahlet, for actually mentioning all those countries which have not been invited. We all know definitely the reason why countries like Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso uh, have not have not been invited to this summit because Mali, these three countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea, have taken a strong stand, together with Eritrea. Uh, they have taken a very strong stand against, imperialism and interference. They have decided to take back power, for the interest of the African people. In the past, starting in the 1960s, the African leaders who have maintained their position that they are here to represent the interests of the African people. We know that they have been in some way poisoned, in another way. They have been toppled from power when the poisoning has refused, has failed, or they have outright killed them. Like for the case of Lumumba, we know poisoning, like what happened to Magufuli. So these leaders who have stood in this position, it has been rough for them. It has been a difficult, they have faced difficult times. But to go on to examine whether the this summit is going to be any beneficial, to the attending, countries, and less beneficial in any way to the Africans or the African countries that are not going, the 4 or 5 African countries that are not going to attend. I think is necessary to go back, like we said, in history, to understand ever since the US Africa Summit started, what has it really benefited the Africans? It's just a few jobs here and there, but majority of the benefit has gone to the United States. Like if you go to Ethiopia, for example, I remember Ethiopia was dropped from AGOA. These industries have come here to exploit cheap labor. So when they are here in Ethiopia, or in Africa, they're here to exploit cheap labor, exploit raw materials in this sense, and they make the biggest profit. And in most cases, for us, it is a compromise. In most cases, it is a compromise. You go to economies like Ghana, which they may maybe say is the one. These are the ones which will benefit more because they have been saying that this is the beacon of democracy on the African continent. You see that it has now one of the highest inflation on the African continent. So what happened? Because to a certain extent, the country opened itself up without controls to these foreign companies, and they took over the economy. So whenever they pull out, whenever these countries, like I said, they are facing economic trouble in the West, they pull out money from our countries to take care of their business. And then we suffer the most here. And so for countries like Ghana, which solely depend, and they have handed over their economic sovereignty to these, imperialistic countries, then they are bound to suffer. So they suffer actually to a certain level, even more than the other ones which have sanctions on them, like Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe now, even though it has had sanctions for the last 20 years, but it's a country which has learned to be self-sufficient. So to a larger extent, you see that these countries which have not, been invited, they build up. Normally, they build up resilience. You can see that Ethiopia, after the sanctions and what and all those things which are coming, it has been able to grow wheat and even start. People are talking about it has more than enough. It's going even to export wheat. So this is the resilience that is built up. And our economists, like Dambisa Moyo in the past, have advocated for self-sufficiency on the continent. It's just that there is some African leaders who don't listen to our economists, but they have advocated for self-sufficiency, and we have to stop the aid. We have to stand as a people with dignity, with a lot of dignity, and start building ourselves up using the resources we have without squandering those resources. So if you ask me whether they are going to miss much, I really don't see what they are going to miss. One, these countries, like we said, they are in a whole lot of big trouble. They don't have money. They don't have money. The United States debt has skyrocketed to, has skyrocketed according to data, which came up the end of last year. The debt in the United States has skyrocketed to $30 trillion. So they don't have money. They are printing a lot of useless, money, and that is what they are telling us. That they are giving us aid. They are not giving us any aid. When you go back to the Paris Climate Agreement, when it was signed, they pledged together with the whole Western world that they will help Africa to mitigate the consequences, the effects of the climate change, which they have caused. They pledged $100 billion. Not even half of that money has been dispensed. Remember the Paris Climate Change, agreement. I think it was signed in 2015 or somewhere there. I think it should be 2015 during the Obama era. So I don't remember very well there, but they have never, come up to meet their pledges. They have never fulfilled their pledges of $100 billion, which they said they would dispense that money onto Africa for Africa to be able to fight against climate change, or even to install clean energy systems on the continent. They have never met, they have never stood up and to meet their, pledges. So, and this is what I'm saying, is that they don't have money. So when we go to Washington for this summit, what is going to happen there, I suspect, is that it's just coercion that is going to happen. Coercion is what is going to happen there. But also, the other thing is that they have run out of options. They have run out of options. What you are going to see in these summits is that is just to it is called face saving. They are trying to save their faces, to show. You have had them mentioning win-win or mutual respect, but these things which they are saying, these slogans that they are throwing around, win-win, mutual respect for Africans, it is China. They are trying to copy China, what China has been doing on the continent, because China in the past is the one who started to come to the African continent and say, we are not going to interfere in your affairs. We are not going to interfere in your political affairs and your economic affairs and how you run your economies. We are here for this, because China comes to the continent strictly for business and tells you what they want, and then you tell them what you want, and then you agree. If you agree, you take the deal. If you don't agree, you leave the deal. So China came up with that, strategy and policy of mutual respect. So they are trying to copy that, and China came up with the Belt and Road Initiative. And we have seen ports built, we have seen railway lines built from Djibouti to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. We have seen ports built in Mombasa. We have seen a railway line built from Mombasa to Nairobi. We have seen a lot of infrastructure even up to Nigeria. We have seen a lot of infrastructure during this, even in Europe itself. So the United States and its European allies also came up with some sort of global infrastructure program. They say that they will dispense money, $600 billion, here $600 billion, but that money is nowhere. They don't have the money. So all this is just talk, is empty talk and face saving to show that they are doing something. But when in actuality, they are not doing anything. The United States and the West, first of all, is not interested in improving anybody's well-being and economies and welfare apart from themselves. We have seen that these people have been here for the last 600 years. Okay, ever since they had contact with the African continent. What have they contributed to the African continent? They have not contributed anything. Instead, they have sucked out, resources. We remember that in 2020, the United Nations came up with a report about, the illicit financial outflows out of the African continent. And from that report, it was published that the money that is flowing out of Africa is around $100 billion every year. And when they traced where this money is going, even though these people say that they are giving us aid on the African continent. But when it was traced, the money flowing out of Africa, it was traced that the money is going to Washington, the money is going to London, the money is going to, to Paris. So even though they give what they call aid, which is around $30 billion, that is what they say that they give, the money that is flowing out of the African continent is much more than that. So they are here to exploit the African continent. And actually that figure, the conservative Pan-Africanists have estimated that figure to be much higher than $100 billion. It is around $200 billion. And when you look at $200 billion flowing out of the African continent, is the same money which is required for Africa to meet its infrastructure needs. Africa faces an annual infrastructure deficit of $200 billion a year. So you can see that these people are robbing us of infrastructure. They are robbing us of aeroplanes, airports, high-speed trains and rails on the African continent. They are robbing us of hospitals. They are robbing us of schools and good healthy facilities, conducive, environment and roads. They are robbing us of all this Western world. But at the same time, they are saying that they are giving us. So they are not interested in improving anybody's lives. And they have been living above their means. That is the other thing. So do not expect, that is where I stand and say that do not expect anything, to come out of the US Africa Summit that is going to be held this month, whereby the African heads of state are going to attend. There is really nothing constructive that is going to, to come out of this. And I think that the African heads of state have to understand this. The African Union, the chairperson of the African Union Commission and the chairperson of the African Union, they have to come together to mobilize the African heads of state to understand that we have to start standing on our feet, that these people have been parasites who have been exploiting the continent, and also to emphasize what we achieved in South Africa recently, that African solutions to African problems has to be our narrative. And not only politically, security-wise on the continent, but also economically. We have to start moving rapidly in that direction, that our economic activities, our military, and security, all of them, we have to be able to take care, of those aspects.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Indeed, for that, it's really important. I just want to add, for our audiences, those 4 countries which, amongst the 6 which are not invited, 4 of them are because of Western Africa. They resisted 3 of them: Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and they stood against, the continued colonialism of France. And they brought, they set up their own government, whether it's a coup or not. Every coup is bad, by the way. Let's
Yes.
establish that fact.
Yes.
Not every coup is bad. So some coups are really needed and brought by the people, and there's nothing. Yes. More important than the need.
Actually, in countries like Mali, it was not actually a coup. It's the people who are discontented with the president. So when the people were angry about the insecurity on the continent, because this president was working with France and destabilizing the place much more, than required, and people are dying. France actually killed more than 4,000 people in Mali. France and the French military, together with the Germans, together. We have heard recently that even Britain was there. So it is ironic that we have military bases on the African continent. We have militaries involved on the continent, and African heads of state and the African Union, they don't know that these people are here. So it is recently that we had that German and Britain were also in Mali. Their troops were in Mali. And it is, it is unforgivable. It is pathetic. It is absurd that African heads of state continue to allow these kind of affairs, and continue to tow the neo-colonial, line. And what we are saying to the African heads of state and the African Union is that the African Union has to stop parroting the neo-colonial narrative, and it has to start, parroting the African narrative, because when it starts imposing sanctions on Mali, when we know from our analysis as Pan-Africans, that the Malian people were tired of France, and then you come as African Union and ECOWAS and put sanctions on Mali. For us, it is it is very disgusting to us as Africans. It is unfortunate and disgusting to us as Africans, and it makes the African Union and ECOWAS look like neo-colonial puppets and neo-colonial tools, which is unfortunate that we don't want to look at these organizations in such a way. So the people in Mali stood up, and when they stood up and they were tired of this insecurity and the incompetence of the president who was supported, by France, then it is the military who responded, to what the people wanted and said, Mr. President, you have to go because this is what the people are saying. They are tired of you. So it was not actually a coup. It was a takeover by the people themselves. And when the African Union fails to analyze this, to make an analysis, a correct analysis of the conditions on the ground, I think this becomes very unfortunate. I think the African Union needs Pan-Africans to be able to advise it. And the people are here. We are here to advise them on what is going on the continent, instead of them just coming out with blanket statements which are neo-colonial and not beneficial to the continent, and making them and putting sanctions and coming up with policies which are colonial in nature. And this is what we abhor, this is what we reject as African people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for elaborating on that. And also it shows, the double standard of the African Union. That's why I asked specifically what should have been the African Union stance, because let's call it a coup, as they say. Also, this happened in Chad, by the way, which is enforced upon the people, the son of Idris, what was their president anyway? Maybe I'm making a mistake, but the son took over the power, and that was not, what the people wanted. But Chad continued its membership in the African Union, and let's not forget that our current chairperson of the African Union is from Chad. So, there's no coincidence. That's a double standard by the African Union. And
absolutely. Absolutely. And that is why I say that the African Union, if it doesn't have people who do analysis for it, I think it is high time that it reaches out to us so that we can do analysis for them and give them advice on what to do, instead of making spontaneous, statements that are not based on research and are not based on what is on the ground, and not based on what the African civil society is saying. We are the African civil society. Because we understand, we are on the ground and we understand what is going on the ground, and they are up there in offices in air conditions. They don't know what is going on the ground with the people. So instead of coming out and making blanket statements and this is not to disrespect the African Union for the work it does. Definitely it has done some good work. It has done some good work, like we said recently, in South Africa, in settling the rebellion that was in the northern part of Ethiopia. But I think that it needs to do more. It needs to be African. It needs to toe the African line. It needs to toe the Nkrumahist line. Would Nkrumah impose sanctions on Mali? No, he would not. Would Nkrumah be selective in his application of sanctions and apply sanctions on Mali and Guinea and not apply sanctions on Chad? Of course not. So it has to be African in its nature. And people who are acting on behalf of foreign forces in the African Union, I think that people have to be uprooted out and removed from the African Union.
Definitely. That's really important. Yes, we don't give up on the African Union. It's founded by our ancestors, our forefathers, who have that Pan-African vision. But is this something that they would have imagined after 60 years or 65 years where this organization would be? Well, that's something to discuss. But it's for the people, it's for the citizens, for the African citizens. So we don't give up that on that organization. Instead, what we are saying is it should serve its citizen to the missions that it has originally established for. But also just on Eritrea also I think it's a cover to say, oh, they don't have diplomatic mission with the US. But the real reason, let's say it, let's call a spade is a spade. Eritrea is the only country in the continent that refused to have AFRICOM in its land, in its territory. So, yeah, that country suffers a lot because it resisted a lot of bullying and continued neocolonialism in the continent. Let's go to the agendas now. And I was wondering if really the main issues that the continent need to discuss, or the leaders have to discuss, is there. There are like 6 or 7 agendas have laid out or are on the table. One is to foster new economy engagement, meaning in this summit, the advance of peace, security, and governance. Those things, as you say, when they divert the attention from their people. Then there's a third one, also reinforce commitment to democracy, human rights, and civil society. Work collaboratively to strengthen regional and global health security, promote food security, what is that? Respond to the climate crisis and amplify diaspora ties. But if I just go quickly, foster new economic engagement. I mean, are we even in equal terms right now, the continent and US, to talk about economy? Peace and security, after, again, I give the example of Ethiopia, after they have done to what they have done to Ethiopia in the past 2 years. And then on the health, we have seen during COVID, Africa was just left alone, from getting those vaccines. They have to have their own way to deal with it. And then, different things, human rights. We have seen, in the name of it, countries have been bullied, destabilized. So number one, are those the burning issues that the African leaders have to discuss with the US? Are this part of this laid items, like illicit financial flows, for example? The illicit financial flows, the one you mentioned, outflows, I mean, and others needs to be there. So just, your reflection on this agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Mahlet, that you even decided to mention one by one of those issues. To break them down. It's very important that the people get to know, the people who are watching us, and the people who care about the African continent and its affairs, pay very close attention, to these things. That is why we said that if the Africans, during 1884, during the Berlin Conference, knew what was going on in Berlin, in Germany, we would not have been, colonized. Or if they knew what the white man was coming here to do, if Africans, all of them on the continent, knew what the white man was coming here to do when he first came here in 18, in the 16th, which was 17th century, in the 1618 or 1615, when Vasco da Gama was coming all over and stuff, those guys from Portugal. If the Africans knew, we would not have been, our people would not have been taken as slaves, we would not have been colonized. So it's important that you break those things down. When we go and talk about the economy, on the economic front, we remember that all the interventions of the United States and the Europeans and their institutions on the African continent, they have not caused anything good for the African people, but misery and depression and compression and poverty on the African continent. When we emerged into independence in the 1960s and 1970s, that is the only period that the African economies actually grew. And we had industrialization. Our share of industrialization after independence, immediately after independence, a few years after independence, our share of industrialization was almost zero. We skyrocketed. Our industrialization went to almost 9%, 7 and 9%. Now, when they saw that we were industrializing, even this Nkrumah mentions it in his work, Africa Must Unite, why they came here. They didn't want us to industrialize, actually. They wanted to use Africa as a market for their products. Nkrumah mentions this in Africa Must Unite, a book which is free on the internet. You can Google it and get it. So they came and overthrew the independence generation of Nkrumah and destroyed all our industries. They say that we should privatize. And those who remember or who had parents and grandparents who were alive that time, they tell you that it was one of the most miserable times when they unleashed structural adjustments on the African continent. So it became, we became a laboratory. The African continent and global South became a laboratory that these people would come and experiment, you know, with their economic policies, with students from World Bank to come and experiment on the African people. And people became poor on the African continent. So it is later until the 1980s, 1990s, when China started growing and China started engaging Africa, that we have seen some growth in Africa. But the strategy of the Western world is to suck, you know, wealth out of the African continent and discourage development, discourage industrialization, discourage progress. That is the strategy. And so you see, you see strategies being employed, like what you are seeing, that the European Union stands in, you know, sits in Europe and passes resolutions that we should not have an oil pipeline in East Africa. We should not have the East African oil pipeline. So that is the same strategy. The same strategy you see that the United States sits in Washington and says we should not build the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which will produce more than 7,000 megawatts of energy, which energy right now is being exported even up to Kenya. And Kenya is receiving some of that energy. So you see that the strategy is the same. On the economic front, the United States and the whole Western world has nothing to offer Africa. If anything, Africa's economies, there have been 7 of the fastest growing economies, 10 of the fastest growing economies, 7 of them, have been in Africa. Of the 10 of the fastest growing economies in the world, 7 of them have been in Africa until 2020. So what they want is that they want to come and suck out this wealth that has been accumulated, just like how they sucked out the wealth that was created. I spoke about Libya, that when they came to Libya, the United States and France, they stole the gold that was in the central bank in Libya, and they took it. And this is not the first time they have ever stolen gold from Haiti. The United States, with its Citibank, they stole gold from Haiti and they took it. So these are thieves who are coming actually to steal the wealth. The strategy is to suck the wealth that has been accumulated in Africa. With the help of China, by demonizing China, they can get chance to come and now suck out of the continent the wealth, which has been accumulated for the last 30 years as they are going down. So this is the strategy. This is the strategy which they are trying to employ and discourage industrialization. Like I said, in the 70s, until the 70s, when our forefathers who fought for independence were overthrown, many of them killed, we had gained a share of industrialization worldwide. Our industrialization, the share had reached, around 9%. When they came and applied the structural adjustments, our industrialization went down. It went down. Now our share of industrialization internationally is at 5%. So these people are very dangerous when it comes, to engaging with Africa. These are parasites, and I think that we need to call a spade a spade. The thing, what it is, we need to call it that. When it comes to security, we have seen that security, for example, in the Congo, in Mali, let me start with Mali. France was chased out of there because of failure. They claimed that they have come there to bring peace, to help Mali fight insurgents. And those insurgents, first of all, they are the ones who brought them from the Middle East. They are the ones who attacked Libya and caused the insecurity in Libya. The United States is the one which attacked Somalia in the 1990s, 1991, 1992, 1993. And it was defeated over there and even ran out. that country has never, stabilized. It's the same thing which happened in Libya. So there's no way the United States and its allies can say that they are coming to give us security on the African continent when they have rather caused so much insecurity and destabilization. Somalia was a very stable country, and Libya was a very stable country, and so how can you say that you are coming to bring security when you are causing more insecurity on the continent? The rebels, when they destroyed in Libya, now these so-called ISIS, they moved all the way to Mali, all over the Sahel, up to Burkina Faso. We have had the attacks have happened in Burkina Faso just this week, moved all the way, to even Ivory Coast, all the way even to Mozambique. They are telling us that it's ISIS. So how is this, how are they going to help when they have even been the source of the insecurity on the continent? So I think these are things which have to be understood by even the African Union itself and the African heads of state. And things have to start, things have to start be mentioning, to be mentioned. Things have to be mentioned in how they are, instead of us, sugarcoating, the problem and pretending as if we don't know the problem. And this will, put Africa in a very, very dangerous position if we don't want to face the problem. Now, this brings us to Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo, if there is any group which has destabilized that country, it is the Western world. Belgium, Britain, the United States. They are the ones, first of all, in the 1960s, who killed the prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, and it's, spread a lot of chaos in that country. That country has never stabilized up to today. So they have themselves to blame. And Africa now is trying to clean up their mess. Africa is now emphasizing the slogan and the narrative of African solutions to African problems. Africa now is attempting to clean up their mess, which they have caused all over the African continent. When Africa was trying to solve the problem in Libya, they came in and disregarded the African Union. So when it comes to security, that is out. They are not coming to bring any security. When it comes to democracy, there's no type of democracy that you bring with guns. So that level, that type of democracy also, you see that it is out of window. When you are talking about democracy, it's out of the window. When you are talking about human rights, the United States is still violating the rights of people of African descent in its borders. People on the street sleeping, like we said in California and Las Vegas, these people are homeless. These are human rights which are being violated. The United States has killed numerous people, 1 million in Iraq. Rights. So when you talk about human rights, I think also on that level, you see that there's nothing that the United States can talk about, on that level that is going to help Africa in any way. So all these things, when we talk about them, I think that I don't see myself that there's anything that the United States is bringing to us that we should be listening to. And I think even they themselves, the United States, know it. They are just pretending, and pushing it further and further. But they know that there is nothing they're going to do, concerning this issue, because we already know, like I said, we are living in the information age. So we know everything that has been going on. And there's no way you can twist words, you can twist the tongue and tell us that we should go this side when we know you have been going the opposite direction. So I think this is what I see when we talk about elaborating on the points that have been made that are going to be discussed and emphasized during this. And the real, the real matter, the real crux of the matter is the economic issue. That is where the issue is. That is the strategy. The strategy is about economics. It's not about all these things. These are just vague terms. These are things which we can deal with, which Africa doesn't need anybody's help.
Indeed, definitely, Kwame. Thank you very much again for going through one by one on the agenda and why we should know that these are wrong, and we know that the U.S. has failed in each those agendas that has been tabled to discuss with Africa. So it's in no position to really to talk about those because itself, the US itself has failed and has failed Africa as well. And now I know that we have taken more than the time we have allocated for this, but if you allow me, I will go ahead and raise one issue just to close this topic. Do you have like 10 to 15 minutes more? All right, then. Thank you. So quickly to close this U.S. Africa Summit topic, what do you? I mean, I can't help myself but really wondering, not wondering. I mean, asking opinions of people and especially Pan Africanists, countries like Ethiopia, who has been bullied, there in the world, in the face of the world, on mainstream media, in every level, should, although it is invited, should participate in this conference? Both if yes and no, why?
Yeah, I think the fact that that Ethiopia was invited, I think is evidence that they have noticed something, that this country has enough capabilities diplomatically uh, to defend itself. And it also goes on to show us that if you have good leaders on the African continent, uh, that the continent can be rebuilt. A narrative can be put up, and that narrative will be picked up by the rest of the Africans. Like we mentioned recently, that the Prime Minister Abiy, he's the one who coined African solutions to African problems. He may not be the one who coined it, but rather popularized it. Okay,
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
insisted. He insisted ever since the Ethiopian problem with the Egyptian problem with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The Prime Minister insisted that we have to respect the African Union. This problem has to be solved within the context of the African Union, not the UN, not anything. So this is very important. So this goes on to show you that if Africa stands on its own, then it will be respected. If we insist that this is what we want to do, this must be done, then we will be respected. And you can see that that insistence is what provided the results that we got. And Tigray was, was taken back by the government, where the rebels were, masquerading and pumping themselves up and being pumped up from outside as if they are anything, tangible that can stand up to the Ethiopian, defense forces. So I think that Ethiopia, as you know, as is being looked at as a country now with certain capabilities, and that is why it has been able to be invited. One, they did not, the Prime Minister and his advisor did not handle this issue aggressively, so that is a cause for respect. That diplomatically, Addis Ababa is at par with any advanced nation, in the world. They have men who are diplomatically, capable, of handling, issues, with a lot of intelligence, with a lot of wisdom. You see that they, the government restrained itself, and it was able to handle this thing diplomatically to its end until the issue was resolved. I think there is a certain level of respect that has been gained by Ethiopia and the Africans generally, because this African Union has been able to lead this. And that insistence is what gives you respect, is what commands respect before the rest of nations. You insisting that this is how we want to do things and we must do these things, because they will apply pressure. Definitely they will apply pressure from outside because they have interests. We know that Ethiopia now has a lot of oil and gas. It has a lot of gold. These are the interests which, which these people are looking at. and they don't want any powerful country, because Ethiopia has extended their hand, to hold hands with the Somalia, hold hands with Eritrea. So they don't want this. They want to keep creating those divisions, not only in the Horn of Africa, but also the whole East African region, to create those divisions so that they can get a chance to exploit those and be rich. So I think that Ethiopia is important that it attends, but like I said, we should not expect much from this summit. It is just for attendance, for the diplomatic cause of it. I think is important to attend, and also this attendance would help as Ethiopia, as the prime minister who has been leading the narrative of African solutions to African problems. It would help to re-emphasize, that African stand that we have to stand for African solutions, to our problems. So instead of not attending, I think if he attends, it helps us to reinforce that narrative of African solutions to African problems.
Thank you very much, Kwame. One of the things, again, why we are holding this kind of discussions, beside creating that awareness to our people, is also we will try to that this discussion will reach to, whether they listen or not, to our governments, and hopefully take, at least to the minimum, it will help them to analyze what is the temperature of the citizens, meaning the continent or the country,
Absolutely.
and what is their
Absolutely.
interest. Because so far the Ethiopian government has not come out and said a single word, whether it's participating or not, or whether it's invited. It's all just, from those things that we read published by outsiders. So definitely this will help also, because at large, it's we want to have that, you always talk about it, that Pan-African body that will be able to advise our Pan-African leaders, this is one of the aims. Thank you very much. Now, I really, because the other day, it's something out of the US Africa summit. So I would like you to share this with our audience while we were discussing over the phone, regarding the recent saga of the European Parliament members, or the European countries, including the UK, by the way, coming out and talking about against France, its continued colonization in Africa. Is it really? And we see it going viral on also social media. And of course, to mention one, is the recent one, is the one, where the MP of Italy, the lady, where it talks about
Yeah,
basically.
she's the prime minister. She's the
Is
prime
it the
minister.
prime minister? Okay.
Yeah, she's the prime
Sorry.
minister of Italy, Madame. I think she's called Giorgia Meloni.
Miller,
Giorgia
yeah.
Meloni. Yeah.
Okay. So where she's talking about basically the same thing what Dr. Arikana has been said 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and which got her to be fired or dismissed from being the ambassador of the African Union to the US. So, but we see them viral. And then, so the question is, are they really sympathizing Africa, or are they just using us, to really bully each other within the European countries? Back to you.
Yeah, Mahlet. Sorry, I was trying to take some water and get a breather here.
And
Yeah,
did I
I
hear
think.
you talk a lot? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important because these are teaching. You see, I do most of the times try to talk a lot, because there is no issue that exists. There is no issue that exists within itself. There's no issue which exists in isolation. But you find that what most of the people, what most of the things people are saying are attached to other reasons. People have reasons why they are saying whatever they are saying. So instead of you taking things on face value, it's important for us to understand why people are doing whatever they are doing. Like when we spoke about the US Africa Summit, this is I'm just giving an example. I'm not going back to the US Africa Summit, but why is the US Africa Summit happening? So that is what we, as Pan Africans, want to understand. We want to understand why is the coup in Mali there. That is what we try to understand as Pan Africans, not just to react as the African Union and ECOWAS and say, oh, on face value, put sanctions. I mean, that is not African, and this shows that you are not educated about what is happening, or you are a coward even yourself. You have decided to sell out your people and not act in a respectable manner that is going to benefit your people. And so this is the position you see that in many cases ECOWAS and African Union has taken. Instead of standing on their feet and defending the people, the African people, they have taken the position of the oppressor. So it's important to understand the reason for things. Why did the coup happen in Guinea? Why did the coup happen in Burkina Faso? Like you said, are all coups negative? Some of these coups are not negative. There's a lot of people who condemn coups, but some of these coups are brought about by people. So all situations have to be analyzed. Now, when we go to Georgia Meloni and her comments and the comments she made about France, because she's the prime minister, the new prime minister of Italy. Definitely, she made those comments before she became the prime minister of Italy. As the prime minister of Italy, of course, she would not make those comments. Now, you asked the question: did she make these comments where she's attacking France for its colonialism? And by the way, why was she attacking France? She was attacking France because of the European Union policy on immigration. That was the spark of that, rambling, of that anger, which she was pouring out and attacking France, because she's Italian, and Italy and places like Greece and Spain have been plagued, are the ones who have been plagued so much with the problem of immigration. Most of the immigrants who are coming, especially from countries like Middle East and others from North Africa, these people have been mostly going to Italy, Spain, Greece. Some of them definitely have been going to Germany and France. But again, Italy economically is not well. Like we said in the beginning, the economies which are contracting and the economies which started actually, facing problems. We had Spain, we had Greece, we had Italy. Those countries are so worse off when it comes to to their economies, that the youth unemployment, some of them is as high as 20%. Some of them even 50%. So Italy is one of those countries which have an economic problem. So that is why you see that there's this economic nationalism. So she views immigration, the immigration policy of the European Union as a threat to the Italian economy. It has robbed Italy of its sovereignty. That is what she sees. Okay, so this creates a conflict within the European Union. So she's not saying these things to France because she loves the Africans. She's saying these things because she wants to protect Italy. She wants to protect the jobs in Italy. She wants to protect the Italian economy. And France and Germany are saying you should let the immigrants in. And for her, she's saying that it is France who is robbing Africa and the Africans of their economies, of their resources. It should stop robbing the resources so the Africans can build their own economies. Because France is stealing. And actually, whatever she's saying is true, is the truth. Okay? But she's not saying this truth because she loves us. She's saying it because she wants to protect, the economy of Italy. And France and Germany are saying, if you look at Germany and France, they are the ones who have troops they are the ones who had troops in the Sahel. Germany and France. What are they doing there? They are extracting the gold and the uranium from the Sahel. They are extracting the sunshine in the northern part of Africa and sending the sun, the solar energy to Europe to power their countries. So, and this is what they are, what she's saying. So France and Britain, and it's the same thing. It takes us back to the same thing which our economists like Dambi Samoy have been saying, that Africa does not need aid. So what she's saying is that stop pretending that you are giving aid to these people. Leave them alone to take care of their business, because your aid is in fact actually exploiting the people. You are using the aid. You are using the aid to exploit the people. So she's saying that France should come out of the African continent and Africans should manage their own affairs, build their economies, so that they are not traveling to Europe to look for better lives. And that is what also we have as Africans, and Dr. Chombori has been saying, Dr. Arikana Chombori has been saying. So, and Africans get excited over this, of course. But this excitement, I think, it stems from the Africans for a very long time waiting for a savior, okay, to say the things which Africans are feeling inside, okay? It's not that the Africans get excited because the Europeans are attacking each other, but because our African leaders are not saying these things. They are the ones who are supposed to say these things. Our African leaders all over the continent, Nana Addo, Macky Sall, Abdou Fattah Sisi, all of them, Museveni, Uhuru Kenyatta, Ramaphosa, these people should be saying these things. But they are not saying it. They fear. You see, recently, Pierre Lumumba gave a speech where he said that African leaders are being intimidated. We are being colonized, and these people are being intimidated. They fear to say the right thing. So that is what Pierre Lumumba said recently on his talk when he was in Nigeria. So when such people come out, to say these things, Africans, we get excited, because for a very long time we are waiting for somebody to speak for us. And that person is not appearing. And especially the people in power. We need somebody in power who is responsible. People in presidency, somebody in the presidency. But rather, our African leaders, instead of saying these things, they say that they are engaging in diplomacy. So they start sugarcoating the truth. They don't want to speak the truth to power, to speak the truth to France and tell them that they should get out of the continent, or to tell the United States that we don't want the military bases on the continent. Instead, they move around and they say they are engaging in diplomacy, and they start, accommodating the lies. But as Pan-Africanists, and people who are looking at the new Africa that we want to construct, the new Africa which we want, I think this is an opportune time for us. When we look at things like this, it's very good for us to understand that there is a conflict within the imperialistic camp. And that conflict within the imperialistic camp, we have always found a way of taking advantage of it. So when they are fighting against each other, like how they have been manipulating our differences, like you see what happened recently in Tigray, that they come and manipulate this difference to their advantage. It is a time for us also as Africans to take advantage of these differences. When we see the United States is having problems with France because the United States is taking over deals which France was supposed to do with Australia. It was supposed to deliver submarines, or diesel submarines, and the United States comes and bullies France and takes over to supply the submarines to Australia. Supply it instead with nuclear submarines. Then we know that there's a problem within this camp. We are supposed to take advantage of that. We are supposed actually to latch onto that message and amplify it as Africans and use that message to mobilize our people, because that is what has been done even in the past. When you look at a year like 1791, the people in Haiti, the Africans in Haiti, they noticed that there was a problem between France and Britain. France and Britain were contesting and they were fighting after Britain had lost the United States as a colony in 1776. So in 1791, our people saw the conflict between France and Britain, because Britain now was paranoid about France overtaking it as the biggest economy in the world. So it started, blocking France from taking slaves from Africa. This information is present in a book called The Black Jacobins, which was written by C.L.R. James. That book, C.L.R. James was a very good associate of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He's the one who wrote that book about the Haitian Revolution. The book is called The Black Jacobins. And so Britain starts blocking France, and they start fighting in the Atlantic Ocean. They start fighting a war. So Britain was blocking France from coming to Africa to take slaves, because France used to buy its slaves from Britain. Britain was the biggest slave catcher. You see, it benefited the biggest, from slavery. So what it did is that it started fighting France. They started fighting on the sea, and our people, they saw this, that these people were fighting against each other. So they also started fighting against France in Haiti, and they defeated France. And when they defeated France, and these were Africans, majority of the people were brought from Africa. They were not indigenous Asians, but they were from Africa and they had been taken there as slaves. So they defeated France, they defeated Napoleon, they defeated Britain, because when they defeated Napoleon and France, Britain came, it wanted to take over the colony, because it was the most profitable colony. Haiti was the San Domingo, which is Haiti today, was the most profitable colony. So France wanted to take over, Britain wanted to take over the colony after France was defeated. They fought against Britain and defeated it after defeating France. And Spain also came. It wanted to re-enslave them. They refused, and they fought against Spain also. They fought 3 superpowers during that time. So it is during these moments that our people have found a chance to liberate ourselves. And when you come also to 1945 and 1940s, our people who organized the Manchester Conference, where even Nkrumah was, people like Jomo Kenyatta and all others were, people like George Padmore, who would later fight for Africa's independence, they organized that after noticing that Europe, the superpower at that time, France and whoever, German, and they were weakened by the by the World War II, the so-called World War II, which P.L. Lumumba normally calls the European tribal wars. These tribal wars, they were fighting against each other. So they had been weakened. That is why even the United States came in to give them the Marshall Plan, because they destroyed everything in their own countries. So after that, our people saw this is an opportunity for us to fight against these guys, because they are at their weakest point. So when they are fighting and wrangling against themselves, this is an opportunity for us. And starting the year 2020, even up to now, this is a great opportunity for us as Pan-Africans and people who are conscious about what is happening in the world, that we need to organize ourselves. These moves which the United States is making, Africa Summit, US Africa Summit, all these are just face saving. But it's because they are seeing that where they are going, the future is bleak. They are looking, where to latch themselves, where to hold themselves. And we as Africans, we should not allow this. And I believe that they have found us when we are awake this time. This is not 1884 and 1885, where they will just sit in Europe and make resolutions and come here and take over. So I believe that we are going to put up a very, very strong fight. So those comments which were made by that lady, Giorgia Meloni, the current prime minister the prime minister of Italy, they were not because she loves us, but because there's friction within the European Union itself. You saw Brexit, that Britain broke away. There has been friction recently, definitely. Hungary is also moving in a different direction, is opposing some of the policies, especially the energy policies of the European Union. Germany is also started. You remember, Olaf, I think, Scholz, the German chancellor, has just left China. He went to make his own deals as Germany. Even though, yes, so there's a friction within the European Union. So this is an advantage for us to study. That is why it is important as Africans, because now we are living in a global village. We cannot, afford anymore to live in isolation and not pay attention to what is going on in the other parts of the world. So it's very important for us to read what is going on in the European Union, read what is going on in the United States. I mean, by reading, I mean pay attention to what is going on there. So there is already a huge crack within the European Union, huge one, that we should take advantage of as Africans. And those comments by Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, is one of them. That is one of them. So she said them to protect herself in that case, but not because she loves the Africans or because she loves Africa.
Thank you very much, Kwame. That's exactly what I wanted, for you to bring to our audience, that we really need to understand what is the deeper state of this. Where does it come from? I hear my echo. So I just want to read some of the comments which are really important. Barrington Brown says it must be made known that as the summit that Africans cannot negotiate under imperialist occupation. It means we have a gun at our head. So it's negotiation under duress. They have to withdraw their troops. So he's referring, I think, to AFRICOM. Important point to take out. Another one by Laila Sir. Russia was not at the Berlin conference. Russia told them Russia does not need land and did not attend. Turkey was present at the Berlin conference, but did not get any land. Maybe, I don't know if you want to react on that. Yeah.
Maybe the person may be right, but the information I have is that Russia was invited. Even the United States was invited, but maybe for some reason Russia say that it doesn't need, because Russia is a very big land mass. They have a very big land. Even the population is still small. And probably that's one of the reasons why these people, the imperialists, are fighting against Russia, because they want to divide Russia. They want to break up Russia, because Russia still has a huge landmass and it has a lot of resources. So Russia did not need any resources from Africa. So I agree with him.
Yeah, and in any case, the thing is, Russia, whether it was present or not, but did not take part in that colonization rush or invasion of the African states. With that, really, we thank our analyst, our Pan-Africanist brother, Kwame Gonza. I always say I get excited whenever I have such interview ahead. But then once I sit behind the screen, I am like any other audience. I do really learn a lot beside my reading, and yeah, it's really important. We don't make it really maybe suitable the way people want, like a half an hour, a 10-minute video, because what we are doing is it's creating awareness, it's bringing that historical aspects, it's knowledge. So knowledge cannot be just said about one topic in 10 minutes. So we give a deeper analysis. So we really encourage to people to go ahead and listen, even if they are doing any other thing, just with an earphone or anything, because there is a lot that we learn from this discussion. thank you very much, Kwame, really, for again, you are always on board. By the way, for the audience, Kwame has his own YouTube channel called Africa Reimagined. It's really, really very powerful. He does it most of the time solo, and sometimes he have a weekly recap of what's going on in the continent. But you really trust me, there is a lot, he has a lot to offer. Thank you very much, Kwame.
Thank you so much, Mahlet. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all who are watching. Those who are watching and have not subscribed to Connect Africa, they should. And those and actually share the channel with other people, because it's very, very few channels who are really talking about the real issues that are going to be spoken about in the next 30, 40, and 100 years. And this is the only channel where you find those things. Other people are just talking about comedy and excitement and clickbaits and stuff like that. That's why
Yeah.
we don't do 10 minutes stuff, because we are talking about things which are going to affect the continent, the African continent, and the African people for the next 100 years. So we are talking about real issues that are going to shape the future of the African continent and the African people all across the globe. So that is why it's important that you invite others, share the channel with others. If you have not subscribed, subscribe. And then if you are watching, you are here, you are watching, definitely you have to like the channel and make some comments, put down some comments, because we have spoken a lot of things, we have said a lot of things. Give us your thoughts, what you think, and in some of the things which you say, we could pick up the important things which you think that we should talk about, or you can suggest the topics that we can come and analyze here, as long as those topics affect the African continent in relations to the world. How does it affect the African people? So we will be able to read through the comments, all the comments here, and we will analyze them and bring to you the information definitely which you want. So that is very, very important. Thank you very much, Mahlet, for having me. And everyone have a good evening, morning, and afternoon, depending on where you are in any part of the world. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I would have just closed it like that. Yeah, thank you very much. So Kwame has done what I'm supposed to do, but thank you very much. He always does it. Thank you, Kwame. Have a good weekend, a great weekend, everyone. As he said, comment below. Somebody's commented on another day to talk about what's going on in Congo. We will do that hopefully next week. Thank you, and have a great weekend.